Greetings. I made it. Almost got lost driving here, but I made it home. Made it through the great girls' state tournament snowstorm of 2025 that we have every year, that the weather people locally here tell us is an old wives' tale, and we don't have it every year, and we have it basically every year. I finally made it back home. Want to thank everybody at the Blaze. They were as gracious hosts as they could possibly be. We had people who I don't even know their names right now, because the normal crews that do this for us were actually gone and on vacation. So we had the backup of the backup of the backup team, did everything they could to get us on the air this week. I think Stu's crew actually postponed taping one of his episodes so that we could do our show this week with everything going on with the weather and you guys getting snowed in and everything else. Because without Aaron here, that adds like another layer of engineering that needs to get done to do a show. It was just a thing. And so many people just pulled extra weight to make it happen for us and for you. And so I want to thank everybody at Blaze TV for what they did for us here for the last few days to make sure that you guys did not miss a single episode. So, and thank you if you didn't miss a single episode as well. In case you had forgotten, I saw my son came downstairs this morning after taking a shower to go to school. I introduced myself, said, "Hey, I'm your dad." Just in case you forgot. Okay, it's been a few minutes. So I'm Steve. Hello. Well, you guys haven't missed me. Maybe you guys have. I believe Todd, is it? Todd?
I reintroduced myself yesterday.
Yes, that's right. That's right, because you shaved, which threw me off all the more. Correct. All right, and then Aaron, you are Aaron. Still, correct?
Last time I checked.
That's all still the same. Okay. And we are still brought to you by our friends over at Patriot Mobile. You know, we may have won this election, but the fight to restore our great nation is only beginning, and now is the time to take a stand. And one of the ways that you can take that stand is to align with companies that put forth, first and foremost, a great product or service. Okay. We're a meritocracy still. So, you know, you don't get to wrap something in the cross or the flag and then just half it and put out a mediocre product. Don't do that. You're gonna carry those emblems into the battle. You're gonna claim them as part of your brand. Then those are two of the most powerful brands in the history of this planet. Make sure you live up to them. All right. So first and foremost, be good, be excellent. Patriot Mobile is. We've been a client in our family now for about 5 years. And haven't regretted it one time. Their outstanding U.S.-based customer service team is always there for you. They'll customize your switch however you want. Keep your phone, upgrade your phone, keep your number, switch your number. They'll make it work for you the way you want it to work. But they also now share our values as well. I know we wish we could just never have to do business with people who hate us, but we can't. But thankfully, there's at least one product we all need where that is the case, and it's our mobile phones. Make the switch today to Patriot Mobile. And if you do, they'll get you started with a free month of service when you use my first name, Steve, as your promo code at patriotmobile.com/Steve. Use the promo code Steve to get started with a free month of service. Promo code Steve at patriotmobile.com/Steve. Next hour, it'll be a Feedback Friday. I believe we have our good friend, FBI whistleblower Steve Friend, with us. There he is. So you know what that means. It is time for the Deace Group. Hello to you, Steve. Good to see you again, brother. And it is time for your weekly look at the week that was, and it begins, as it always does, with issue 1. Bleep. Lord Nefarious says.
But I think this was a lesson in finding one thing that you let yourself feel. And I let myself feel joy about DJ. And I hope he's alive for another, 95 years. Yeah. But I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide.
Would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. So that's easy to call out.
Well, a woman is whatever. If you feel like you're a woman, then you're a woman.
I haven't seen his comments. What Democrats opposed was unleashing
sexual predators on girls throughout the United States of America.
So what do we do now that Republicans just literally essentially killed all of the poor people in America? Do you just literally want people to die? Oh, quit sending our money to other countries.
At this point, the damage to the agency is done, the expertise lost. We already see projections that it's in the hundreds of thousands of deaths that we have increases.
I'm moving. I'm getting out of this country.
I don't know if this is going to get me banned or not, but Donald Trump needs to be shot, guys. Someone needs to shoot him.
An off-duty Boston police officer is taken to the hospital after shooting and killing a knife-wielding man inside of a Chick-fil-A on Boylston Street.
My condolences and all of our thoughts are with the family of the individual whose life has been lost.
If you wanted to make us safe, pass gun reform.
We're going to continue to fight back, and we are going to continue to speak lies to his truth.
Well, Jen, I think we all have a little bit of PTSD.
It just never ceases to amaze me how much we have switched sides. Much of my career, I have just not even wanted to watch attempts by the right to be cool. Or, we used to call it trending, or now we call it being viral. Okay, but much of my life I didn't want to watch it because it was just so cringy. Okay, I mean, listen, I love God Bless the USA as much as anybody, man, but we will remix that song into a disco, okay, into a rap, okay? I mean, we have recycled that song my entire life. Aaron doesn't know an American right that hasn't found. We'll auto-tune it. We'll do whatever we can, okay? It's like the one song we are permitted to sing, and we'll just keep, rehashing it over and over again. The cheesy conversion scenes in Christian movies, right? Doesn't it just seem like in the last few years on the just the attempt to go viral, to trend, to be noticed side of things, we've just completely switched sides. Like, they are incapable. Can you just, the whole thing used to be with righties, can you guys just be cool? With lefties, it's like, can you guys just be normal? Who's that to? Who is the audience? And here's the thing, it's not an isolated thing. They produce this kind of content on a regular basis. It's clearly something they think their people are going to respond to. But damn, it's so cringy. When did they become the dweebs and the dorks? That's just happened in the last few years, hasn't it?
Yeah, but they still control all the institutions.
Well, we're not going to undo 7 years of work, Todd, in 6 months. Okay,
I'm just saying.
Keep doing that, though, and it'll make it a lot easier for us to do something about that. Okay?
Obviously, this is why the punchlines aren't enough. They should be.
But they didn't capture those institutions, Todd, acting like this. And if they had acted like this, they probably would not have captured them. They were the cool kids that was cool to be aligned with them. We were the losers. We were looking for, hey, can we find a guy who was on a soap opera for 3 weeks once and said a nice thing about Ronald Reagan and make him the keynote at CPAC, right? We did that. How many times have we mocked that our entire careers doing this show? That's been the American right. That's who we have been, just glomming, looking for any amount of pop culture, digital relevance whatsoever. And it was just cringy to watch. And now it's them. And it blows my mind all the more because of what you just said, that they own all the institutions and everything else to manufacture an image, and they still are just completely incapable of it. We still get this.
I still see them as being incredibly dangerous. That's all. I think it took Donald Trump and his team of super friends to do this, as you know, and you've documented, despite all of our expectations. I just think, the right is the same. It's feckless. It doesn't get things done, and this level of crazy is ultimately dangerous if we don't take it seriously.
Steve, let me go to you to lead things off here. Sorry, with my little digression there. What was the most bile-producing thing that you just saw in Aaron's montage, and why?
As someone who has over a decade in law enforcement, I think I got to go to DJ, who was made an honorary special agent for the Secret Service, and combine that with the mayor of Boston, because, you've talked about it before, the fact that we are in this cold civil war, the fact that it is an asymmetrical battle because people on the political right, the libertarians, say, well, you have a yard sign for a different candidate, but as long as you mow your grass, we can all just get along. We all want the same things. And the other side is the Borg from Star Trek. And it says that which not is banned is required. You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile. And here you have it. The masks are fully off, and they are flagrantly advertising it to the entire nation that it is an irreconcilable difference that we have, the asymmetrical battle. And we are getting ever and ever closer to it becoming kinetic, to it having to engage in Antietam Part 2, because they hate you. You have the mayor of Boston who just snubs one of these sworn law enforcement officers for her city, somebody who straps on that body armor every day, that duty belt, and goes to protect and defend the citizens of that city. And she can't even have the decency to hold comment. She has to right away go to the victim, as she sees it, the person who engaged in a violent action against a law enforcement officer and did not expect a negative consequence. And then also the response to DJ. And the fact that we had to immediately, always and forever go back to the guided tour of the Capitol on January 6, 2021 as the worst day in the history of the country. Any other way, we have to pivot it back always and forever to Donald Trump and anybody who is right of center. They hate you, and they will not rest until you're in a cage or you're out of life.
I agree with every word of that. Aaron.
It's going to be what's her face on MSNBC. Was that Nicole Wallace,
who former George W. Bush White House staffer. Yes. Yeah.
I saw some of the characterizations of that video that you just saw, and I thought, this is just exaggeration. She did not say it. Maybe if you took it a certain way, maybe you could get that out of that clip. And then I watched the clip, and she said, "I'm so happy for DJ. I hope he lives another 95 years and doesn't kill himself because of Trump supporters." Even by, what is that meme? Our standards for you were already low, but holy bleep. Good Lord. What kind of mind, what kind of soul brings themselves to say that? Donald Trump is absolutely right.
The one Steve Friend just described,
yes,
as a matter of fact.
Donald Trump is absolutely right. In fact, he doesn't go far enough. She should have been fired yesterday for that.
Yes.
That's ridiculous. That is soulless. That's shameless. It is demonic. You cannot, absolutely not, share anything resembling a country, society, culture with that. It has to be excised. It has to. Whatever produces that line of thinking has to be excised.
100%. I mean, you guys are 2 for 2 so far, no doubt. So, Todd, you're batting cleanup here.
Well, that's why I said they remain very, very dangerous. You're absolutely right, Aaron. I think Aaron and Steve both highlight people that embody this. Perhaps the mayor of Boston the most. Again, doing it with ashes on her forehead. This is Boston, Massachusetts. I know a liberal haven, but going forward, we can't have major American cities.
The American Revolution was literally born via the Sons of Liberty in Boston, Massachusetts. Yeah.
The business, the commerce that takes place there. And over again, you have a church and a major top 5 population, if certainly top 10. It might be top 5. Everybody let her be in charge. The church doesn't come down on her. You elect her. That's unsustainable. It doesn't matter if they're making stupid, jokey memes. Yes, they are cringy. But they do hate us. They hate being American. They want to destroy this place. And we keep defaulting to absolute nonsense, cruise control, Americana BS. It's not going to last. It's not remotely serious. And this is where our old friend Jonathan Kahn, if given this reprieve that we all asked for, and we all signed on to some level with Donald Trump, give us time. If we don't really grow up, the demons are going to come back 70-fold, and it's going to be the book of Jeremiah. Laugh all you want, but damn it, grow up. Will anybody be a real adult? The men of Boston are absolute failures for letting her, even before this happened. Why is she in charge of you? Why? I'm sure it has something to do with go Pats, go Celtics. Yeah, I can't make this plain. She's in charge of your city. You failed. Do something about it.
Can I just underscore one thing, in case it wasn't clear in the montage? Boston's mayor, in reaction to a good guy with a gun, stopping a madman with a knife, apologized to the family of the madman with the knife. And then like 48 or 72 hours later, she was in front of the House of Representatives calling for gun control.
Yeah.
At that point, there's a point, I know this well, because I'm in this phase with a toddler, with a 3-year-old right now. At some point, there's a point where you just say, nope, no, we're not arguing here. I'm the adult, you're a child, you do as I say. We're at that point with these people. They just cannot be reasoned with on any level whatsoever.
And here we have Steve Friend on our show. Doesn't have his job. Can we flip this script? There's way too many people in that montage that should not have their job. Steve Friend should have his job. So this, to your point, see, that's what we need to reverse. That.
Exit question on a scale of 1 to 10. With 1 being the odds, our friend and sister Jill Savage ever has to worry about being sexually harassed by Lindsey Graham. And 10 being the odds, Lindsey Graham is a closeted homosexual betrayer, and it's a shame, really to the shame of a Bible Belt state like South Carolina, that they have permitted such a quisling and an effeminate globalist to represent them in the Senate for the last 30-plus years. Rank this week's level of total depravity, Todd.
I don't think you've ever done a Lindsey Graham that matches so perfectly the conversation we just had. I mean, that just absolutely nails it. It's a 10.
Steve, what about you?
Well, as the self-anointed defender of our sister Jill Savage's chastity against every wretched hive of scum and villainy across the galaxy, I'm going to rest easy because it's a 10.
Brother, that's a long list. If you look at the replies, my friend, you are a busy man. You don't need your job back then if you're doing that. All right, there's a lot of people back there you need to defend her from. Aaron, what about you?
It's a 10.
All right, let's get to issue 2. Now, even the normies realize that the lines have been drawn.
After a disastrous 2020 election, all Democrats had to do for a little while on the national stage was do the Homer Simpson and disappear into the hedge and bide their time. The one thing they could not do when they had the national spotlight for the first time was this.
The chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
Congressman Al Green, waving his cane and shouting nonsense, was later this week censured by the House of Representatives. Even some Democrats voted for his censure. But he wasn't the only Democrat who acted out. The entire party, at least those who showed up, made absolute clowns of themselves all night during Trump's address to the joint session, holding up little auction paddles and never clapping for anything, including for a kid with cancer. Apparently, the message they've settled on post-2024 election is that they hate everyone and they hope your daughter takes a volleyball spike to the face from a dude.
So, first question, gentlemen. Last summer, when we had the Biden-Trump debate, all right, so we knew people that do what we do for a living, that follow this, that support us, that listen, watch, subscribe, they knew. But really, at most, I think we represent, at most, 20% of the electorate in this country. So we knew forever that Joe Biden had dementia. Maybe even on some level, Normie America kind of maybe, yeah, he's kind of past his prime, but, was maybe aware but didn't think it was like an acute condition necessarily. And then we had the debate on June 27th of last year. And in front of about 80 million people, linear and digital, Joe Biden went out there and demonstrated he's not just sundowning now. He's not there. And that, like a Thanos snap, changed the entirety of the campaign. Overnight, everything changed. What the media had tried for the better part of 3 years to cover up, to hide, to label a conspiracy theory is now all out in the open. And that same media now is gaslighting, well, this is a constitutional crisis and the president has to go. I think it is possible. Now, the audience numbers are not going to be the same. But I on some level, I think it is possible that this speech, Mr. Friend, has a similar impact. For whatever amount of normie Americans, and you know, I ran into a normie American, my Uber driver, one of my days here down in Dallas. Young black man, and in Dallas, and he's wearing a MAGA hat, and he's got another one on his dashboard. I would not have seen that even 2 or 3 years ago, let alone 5 or 10. To me, that's normie America, a guy who's just starting to figure out, hey, we just can't continue on, and maybe doesn't truly yet know and hasn't even contemplated the deeper reasons of how we got into this deep hole that we're in, okay? So if you're one of those people and you're watching this the other night, and you see they can't stand for a kid for cancer, and Trump even laid a trap at the very beginning. He said to them, hey, they're not going to cheer. I could literally come up with a cure for cancer. They won't cheer. They could have defied him. They could have put him in a box. They could have taken the higher road. They could have kept boos and hisses to actual policy disagreements and stood and rose and cheered for the things that every American who doesn't, you know, literally worship Lucifer would stand and cheer for. They chose not to do that. And so, Steve, I kind of think that just like the debate last year on Biden's dementia penetrated the normie bubble, I kind of think maybe this speech, this albeit smaller audience, penetrated the normie bubble of some of the zero-sum game that we were just talking about in the last segment, that the normies are like, these people just freaking hate my guts. They hate everything. What's your take on that, Steve? What do you think?
I think that this speech was the capstone on basically a week that did penetrate this bubble. And because of that, a bunch of other things that happened along the way, the audience is actually going to be larger than who was watching that State of the Union address. Because the prior week, we had the disaster of the Epstein file not really being released. And we had the awareness now. The question is, do you know what time it is? That was the term that was in vogue a couple of years ago, and it's kind of fallen out of favor. That has to be reintroduced. Do you know what time it is? So the Fox News watching people who are sort of political junkies who just have been saying that it's the men and women of the FBI are great. We just need a change at the top. Well, it was demonstrated there that the subterfuge goes deeper than just Christopher Wray. James Dennehy actually even getting himself a honor guard and a bagpipe walk out of the office, televised on MSNBC. And similarly, you had the Senate sitting there and voting. And can we have this strange new respect for my fellow Sinai Award winner, Fetterman, voting against the bill that would have protected girls from boys, against girls from being protected against their orbital sockets being shattered by a volleyball traveling 30 miles an hour at their face. And that gets to not just the political junkies, but to just the guys that are interested in the Pats and the Celtics. And now you have Donald Trump actually laying that trap in the beginning of that speech. And I think that he finally is aware of what time it is. He's not going to be concerned with what Bob Woodward and Maggie Haberman write about him, because he's finally accepted that there's nothing he can do or say to ever get their approval. So now it's time to be energetic.
I agree. I think there are two things that are dramatically different that have led to this, to the other things that we're seeing, the level of planning and execution way different than the first term. Two fundamental things. One, I do think he was clearly spiritually impacted by nearly getting shot to death in the face last July 13th. But before even that happened, Steve, I think he finally came to the realization he's pursuing chicks that are never going to say yes. Maggie Haberman's never going to say yes. All right. Bob Woodward's never going to say yes. He's never going to be respected again within the circles that he was once respected and revered within when he was a pop culture icon. I think it took him years to finally accept that. By the way, I did look. So on linear alone, 37 million people watched that speech on Tuesday night. So I have no idea what the digital numbers are. So I would think, Aaron, would you say it's not maybe 1-to-1, but maybe another 10 or 15 million probably watched digitally? We think that's conservative. So you are kind of almost approaching the numbers for that debate then, if you're doing that. If you're going to 37 million, you're adding another 15, that's now well over 50 million people watched that. And that's not even talking about the viral clips and everything else. So that does maybe bolster my case about this penetrating, Aaron, into the normie water table. What say you?
Yeah, so... State of the Union address probably lends itself to a more partisan audience, but I think this has the possibility and probably did penetrate further than that. Because if you're not watching, but you're a nonpartisan, hopefully your algorithm on some level, it's a big event, is going to be feeding you what? Oh, Trump honored a kid with cancer by making him an honorary Secret Service agent. he announced to another kid who lost his father, an LA County Sheriff's deputy, that he's going to West Point. Oh, and there's another thing. Al Green got kicked out from the Sergeant of Arms for waving his cane around and yelling nonsense. Those are the moments, if you didn't watch this live, that endured past the speech itself. What's happening right now with the Democrat Party is what looks like on their side of the aisle when they don't have strong leadership and competent leadership. For my entire life, they've had a staff of basically demon generals over there who are able to herd cats in hell. Now all you've got is just cats in hell. I mean, it's just hell cats. That's all you've got. They're basically reverting to the lowest common denominator over there because they don't have anybody organizing them. And there's one person you can thank for that. Barack Obama. The dude was very effective. But his pride, ego, and hubris never allowed for the inculcation of new blood and new leadership to be developed in that party. And they are reaping that harvest now, I think. I think that's really what's happening here. Their one kind of remaining leader, Nancy Pelosi, she is very diminished right now because of her health. Hakeem Jeffries, deer in the headlights. Hey, Gavin Newsom said that dudes shouldn't be competing on women's sports teams.
That's literally what happened.
Well, we shouldn't have sexual predators being unleashed on our... What? So they have an absence of leadership problem over there.
Todd?
You know, you, in the last 48 hours, were actually posting about this, about the sooner or later you have to transition to legislative successes. I don't remember the particular context or who you were bending this back and forth, but you're absolutely right. And I don't mean any particular legislation, but just like the next midterms. Is it the same as it ever was? Does that change? Does how we, as Normie America, educate our children, or do we still pass it off to the same kind of schools? Or is something fundamentally going to look different that Donald Trump doesn't have to do? I mean, that's how we're going to know. This is, and
I like that distinction that Donald Trump doesn't have to do.
And that's why, going back to where we started, you don't suddenly see people. Basically, everybody who's brave right now, if they weren't brave before on their own, like men like Chip Roy, they're the fake tough guy standing behind Donald Trump. Yeah, in your face. Where were you when Donald Trump wasn't there?
Yep.
And we're I'm telling you, we're gonna end up in
it's a conversation about Florida we had at the beginning of the legislative process.
Yes.
They could not wait. They couldn't wait to try and cast DeSantis into lame duck. Can we just go back to cash and checks and gravy train grift? Will you just leave us alone?
Yes.
We gave in for 6 damn years. You're about to be term limited out of here. Just give us back our grift and complacency. We just had this conversation about Florida in the first few weeks of the year before Trump even got inaugurated, just to go to what you're talking about right now.
The people are the problem. We don't have a healthy church. Our men suck. Long term, there's not great reasons to be optimistic. I'm not utterly pessimistic now, but those things have to change. Have to.
I 100% agree. 100%. All right, exit question. If the future outcome of the cold Civil War after Tuesday night were a #1 Billboard hit from the 1980s, which 1980s #1 hit would it be? A, Sweet Dreams Are Made of This. B, Against All Odds. C, How Will I Know? Or D, Stuck With You? Aaron.
Stuck With You.
Stuck With You. You know, I didn't realize.
I wasn't listening.
I did not mean to do that to you.
I was listening.
You were coughing
I was
over
not
there,
listening. I was sneezing up a storm, so I have no idea what she even said.
I wasn't trying to set you. It's just in my head, go to Aaron first because you went last time. And then after I did, wait a minute, dude's over there coughing up a lung. I should not have done that. So I apologize, Aaron. All right, sorry. Didn't mean to, I wasn't trying to do to you what you tried to do to me. which is make you look bad. Yeah. I wasn't trying to do that.
It's my job.
Todd. I think it's stuck with you.
You do. All right. What do you think it is, Steve?
How will I know? One of the lyrics of that song is, I say a prayer with every heartbeat. We got to say a prayer. We got a little bit more time to wake up more people and pray that they actually do and stop being worried about their fantasy football and filling out their March brackets.
One thing we need to do, and that would demonstrate we have a commitment here, is what we're going to talk about with the very next topic on the show. Stay tuned. Back here on the Steve Deace Show, let's continue with our weekly look at the week that was, as we say hello again to our friend, Steve Friend, FBI whistleblower. He's our special guest this week on the Deace Group. Let's get to issue 3. Someone must be punished, starting with James Dennehy.
Last week was the first rake step of the second Trump administration as Attorney General Pam Bondi hyped the release of Phase 1 of the Epstein files, only to produce some binders for influencers filled with redacted page after redacted page of nothingness. Attorney General Bondi said she received a tip-off that the FBI field office in New York was withholding troves of Epstein documents, so she passed the buck to FBI Director Prakash Patel, who ostensibly forced the resignation of the director of the aforementioned FBI field office, James Dennehy. Bondi now says she has truckloads of Epstein documents.
I gave them a deadline of Friday at 8 a.m. to get us everything, and a source had told me where the documents were being kept. Southern District of New York, shock. So we got them all by, hopefully all of them, Friday at 8 a.m. Thousands of pages of documents. I have the FBI going through them, and Cash is also, now that we have Cash here, it's a game changer, of course, and Cash is going to, Director Patel is going to get us a detailed report as to why the FBI withheld all of those documents.
All right, let's start here with the true or false. Todd, I'll start with you. True or false? The Trump administration cannot be ultimately successful unless it punitively punishes at least one traitor, corruptocrat, whatever term you want to use. But an example must be made, true or false, out of one of these people. We're not going to get, lineups of orange jumpsuits and shackles that we all would fetishize at this point. So let's just be honest about that. But there does need to be at least some strategic examples made of people being punitively punished for these kinds of acts of corruption, obstruction, etc. Otherwise, the administration probably cannot be ultimately successful over the last 4 years or the next 4 years. True or false?
It's absolutely true. And it has everything to do what I talked about last segment. Things have to be fundamentally and obviously different. And what you're hearing there, what you've already seen from Pam Bondi, and even the tone we're talking about there is leading to a place that's not ultimately going to cut it. It's the executive. Cash being in there should make things easier, but why a study? Why are we looking into fire somebody? This is what it has to be. Heads need to roll. The other side does it with impunity. Steve, I'm going to point out again, the guest on our show right now does not have a job. It was really easy for them. And we need to flip the script. That's the script we need to flip. What are we studying? It is such a target-rich environment in Washington, D.C. of people who can and should be fired. We don't need to hear a long white paper on what happened here. Can somebody big now?
Aaron.
Yes. Insubordination, I don't know if that's necessarily a punishable crime here, but that's obviously what happened, isn't it? That's what they're saying.
How's
happened.
it not obstruction?
And yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Is that obstruction?
Mm-hmm.
Could you stretch obstruction to cover this? You have to, at some point in time, let these people know that no, you don't just get to walk out of here. Yeah, thank you for resigning, but you don't just get to walk out of here, as Steve said, with a bagpipe processional. You don't just get to walk out of here with your pension intact. There are real consequences for you if you disobey, if you do not carry out the lawfully doled out actions and executive orders of this president, the lawful actions and directives of the Attorney General and the Director of the FBI. You don't just get to walk away with all of your basically career intact. You don't get to do that if you insubordinate and you obstruct. You don't get to do that. So we're way past due for a lot of things. One of them is saying no to the courts, and this is another thing. Make an example out of somebody beyond just forcing their resignation.
So I wanted to make sure that we schmucks spoke first. We're just laymen here, analyzing from afar, Steve. You have been deeply embedded in this world, so you're the subject matter expert here. So I wanted you to get the final say on this first round. Same question goes to you.
Unequivocally, this is true, and for a couple of reasons. I mean, I don't know if anybody caught it there, but the Attorney General of the United States of America has to have sources tell her where evidence of crimes are within her own department, because it's with the Southern District of New York, within the Department of Justice. So there has to be accountability because the stakes are incredibly high when you swear an oath to protect the Constitution and protect your fellow citizens against fraud and force. And if you use that post to personally enrich yourself or push a political narrative or punish your political enemies, then you have to go to jail. Do not pass go. And if we do this, then we can actually have an opportunity to buy back some of the trust of the American people that was lost over the last 4, 6, 8, 12 years because we haven't held these people accountable. They've been allowed to retire anonymously and move on to lucrative post-FBI, post-government careers where they can personally enrich themselves and then live off the reputation of the agency that they've left in their wake. And as far as crimes go, let's have a callback. Obstruction of an official proceeding, 18 U.S.C. 1512C. I think
something
that's
poetic about that. Yes, indeed. Yes. Steve, can you educate people like me? How much of a detriment would it be to national law enforcement efforts for Kash Patel to essentially just liquidate all management positions in the Southern District of New York FBI office and say, we're just hitting the Control-Alt-Delete button? I mean, that is there some, deep investigations into human trafficking, the mob, or something that would be greatly hindered in terms of the public interest by making such a move?
The American people have a fundamental misunderstanding of what the FBI does on a day-to-day basis because they watch TV and movies. By and large, the most part, FBI agents are indoor dogs, most of which never work criminal cases. They work on national security or counterintelligence, something to that effect, or something administrative. Most FBI agents don't arrest anyone in their entire career. Most FBI agents never go to trial. Almost every single press release that the FBI puts out, if you read it to like paragraph 2, where it says, according to the court documents, you will find that it was a local law enforcement officer, a detective, who made a case and just happened to have a nexus that attached to the federal law. So the FBI was able to come in and adopt it and take credit for it after, of course, stretching it out for years on end so that they could hit their quotas, which is another fundamental problem. This is a conversation that needs to be had, and a legitimate suggestion that I think that could be done, because the FBI does this already, and that is deputize local deputies, police officers, detectives, experienced guys, make them task force officers, which they do, and make the FBI an unarmed investigative agency as it originally was in 1908 at its founding. So be there to support the local agencies, the state agencies, to bring crime down, as opposed to juking the numbers like they did for January 6th, which I blew the whistle about, so that they can go back to Congress and say, you gave us 11 billion. Why don't you give us 12 or 13 billion? Because look at all these numbers that we generated for you.
That's a very detailed, I want to make sure I understood exactly what you just said, Steve, because that seems like a very detailed explanation as to why the answer to my question is no.
You only have to look back to 2020, where we stayed home and stayed safe to flatten the economy. And they told every FBI person to come into the office sparingly, if ever, just stay home. And there was no change in your life, Steve, or Todd, or Aaron. All of the unrest was local law enforcement that was told to stand down. No major cases, no terrorist attacks happened for the entire year.
Can we talk about Pam Bondi then, Steve, for a second? All right. So I want to mention to you what I said on our Blaze coverage of Trump's speech the other night. There's a class of Republicans, and I don't know how much you were paying attention to this kind of stuff when you were an agent. And I kind of hope the answer is not that much, because, the last thing we need are partisan agents, regardless of which direction we're talking about, right? Okay, so, but there's a class of Republicans that have figured out, if they say certain magic phrases or incantations where Donald Trump is concerned, then the entire GOP base and the vast majority of conservative media is just going to magically, it's like the end of the last Spider-Man movie, and the world just forgot that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. Okay, that much of the right is just going to magically forget whatever they were in the Republican Party prior to like 2017. Like never happened. Like the world just started that year. She's actually in that group. Throughout the course of her career, she's not someone who necessarily rolled with people like us. I don't believe for a second if she wasn't the U.S. Attorney General, when Ashley Moody got appointed to the Senate seat in Florida, I don't believe for a second that Ron DeSantis would have appointed Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of Florida, in her place. I don't. Okay? That kind of gives you some of the background, Steve, that you're tracking with me here so far? Okay? And so I think what happened last week is she got caught playing a game. Mm-hmm. And it's a game that it's the old commercials when we were kids. Is it Live or is it Memorex? Okay, she got caught playing political karaoke. Not a tune, not a song that she really knows how to sing, but she can match the tone every few notes, and make it with enough beers and everybody else sound legit. And thought that she was going to kind of play the grifter social influencer, game, and in the process really, threatened to damage the credibility of people like libs of TikTok, who have been, I think, among the most important influencers on the right in the post-COVID world, and kind of just brought them all into whatever this plan was to do this hoodwink game, and it just absolutely blew up in her face. And she's kind of on notice right now and is still doing interviews about this. So I'm kind of inclined to think she is going to give us something where Epstein is concerned. Otherwise, they would probably just try to do the whole Homer Simpson gif. And it's not like we don't have 57 other crises right now and act like last Friday never happened. What's your response to what I just said so far?
I think you're accurate and you're on it, because this is the battle of our time here. And I know it's important to me, it's near and dear to my heart, and I'm pretty siloed in this, but just looking at the overall landscape, it's not what the Doge is doing with the VA or HUD or the EPA. The FBI, the Department of Justice have the ability to take away your freedom or potentially your life. It will be the end of the country if we lose the war to take this back. And this was the first battle. There's going to be lots of battles along the way. Mm-hmm. But here's the fundamental understanding you have to have. This battle is to get the foothold on the beaches. This is us taking the beaches of Normandy. If we don't do that, we cannot move inland and push back on the Third Reich. And this Epstein list failure, this was the underlings within the FBI stepping to the new director and stepping to the new attorney general saying, we are still in control of this. And they're gaining momentum. And if there's anything that I've learned about government employees is that they lick their finger, put it in the air and see where the winds are going. Whoever has the momentum, they will side with, because all they care about is their jobs, by and large, for the most part. Pam Bondi lost that opportunity. It's not completely over. She's out of the box slow, but she can actually turn the tide here, but it's going to require what we're talking about, and that is accountability. That is people getting fired. Mm-hmm. That is people being prosecuted.
So tell me then, and I suggested this to Glenn here on The Blaze the other night, and he thought it was a good idea. Let me suggest it to you. Whenever you're in the midst of a major transaction that you're not in a position to complete yet, you put money in escrow, right? You give a down payment, right? Why can't, it's Pam's department that she oversees that put Ghislaine Maxwell in prison for life as a human trafficker. There cannot be a human trafficker without a human traffickee, Steve, as you well know, okay? So just give us a name, a down payment, one confirmed name. It can even be somebody we largely suspect that you probably can't prosecute jurisdictionally, like a Prince Andrew, all right? But a confirmed name of somebody that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell that matters, a VIP name that they were human trafficking to, confirm that for us to send us a signal that you are going to follow through this time. Can she do that if she wanted to?
She could do that, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be the Epstein case. She could stand up a task force like the FBI did for January 6th and say, look, we have ongoing investigations looking into 200 plus individuals who were part of this. We cannot compromise those investigations. But I'll tell you what we can do. We can open up another very salacious case that people have a lot of intrigue and questions about. Like, why don't we find out about the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt or the Las Vegas shooting, both of which those individuals have no expectation of privacy. There's no ongoing investigation. They can buy back some trust with transparency, but we are going to need a huge name, even if it isn't with the Epstein case.
Exit question. I'm putting the over-under on people prosecuted by the Trump administration for treachery at 1.5. Are you taking the over or the under, Aaron?
I'm going to say the over. I'm being optimistic.
Todd?
Has to be over.
Steve?
Over. They got 3 of them last night.
That's true. When I put this together, they hadn't done that yet. Thank you for reminding me. I didn't update my script. All right. But I deserve that, so thank you. All right, issue 4. If President Trump said he would prosecute anyone you selected, whom would it be? Whom would you pick and why? Aaron?
Anthony Fauci.
Oh, that's
I know he was
no-brainer.
pardoned, but I don't care.
That's an absolute no-brainer. Or at least have the FBI, a task force, put together the files and send them off to the state attorney generals, like what Steve was just talking about, right?
Yep.
I'm sorry, Todd.
CEO of Pfizer.
That's a good
horse
one,
doctor.
too. That's a very good one, too. Steve, what about you?
Lesser known, Jennifer Moore, Executive Assistant Director of the Human Resources Branch of the FBI, signed off on the suspension of every FBI whistleblower, testified to the Weaponization Committee, lied under oath when she testified 2 times, and then retired and now works for General Electric Aerospace with a lucrative post-bureau career.
That's a very good one, too. And also, she's the Hydra, though, as you know that, Steve. I mean, you cut her off, and there's 15, 20. You could be cutting off, what's her name, Jennifer what now?
Jennifer Moore.
We could be doing Jennifer Moores the rest of our lives. And that's just the sad state of our government. All right, let's get to predictions. Aaron, go.
Within the next 3 years, Elon Musk will announce that his companies will be in development of the X phone.
Can completely see it. He's even kind of talked about it already before.
I think that's actually how he strong-armed Google and Apple into letting Twitter remain on their app stores.
I agree. That's a good connecting of the dots there. Todd.
It is going to be abundantly clear, and I don't think we've ever done a show where all the themes dovetail so perfectly, but we're going to have it be abundantly clear that this whole measles thing is absolutely just running back COVID. It was made in a lab. This is the vaccine strain of it. People are dying with something else, and they're saying they died of measles, and it's all happening because there were no consequences. Fire somebody!
Steve.
After you had the buckle by Attorney General and the FBI Director here on the Epstein list, I think sometime by this summer we will see some allegation of a Roy Moore, Brett Kavanaugh type of allegation against somebody prominent in MAGA world, yes. And the pressure will be on those folks to see if they do the Jeff Sessions, if they hold the line just to create some sort of static between the AG, the FBI Director, and Donald Trump.
That's the kind of stuff the spirit of the age does. You're right. Ultimately, you can't beat the spirit of the age with transactionalism. You can for a while make an alliance like that work, but eventually we come back to what do you really believe, right? Mm-hmm. My prediction this week is that Casey DeSantis will end up running for governor of Florida and that she will end up getting elected. I do think that will happen. Steve, good to see you. As always, brother, thank you.
You got it. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too. We'll come back, and it'll be your turn. Feedback Friday is next. Stay tuned. Back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. Let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. You can do that one of numerous ways. For example, you may email the show, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Please make sure to subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel at Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube. Speaking of YouTube and why we had to start a new channel, I had a call yesterday with a top constitutional law firm. And I think you may be hearing more about what's going on there relatively soon. In response to, now we know that the government was not only censoring people like us, but then promoting and promulgating other media that established and was furthering its narrative, like Politico and others, at the exact same time. So should have some news on that. That wasn't just a wild hair, and then I wasn't going to follow up on it, okay? So that's not... I get wild hairs all the time, but if I'm telling you about something, it means I intend to pursue it. And so I have been working on it, had a very good phone call yesterday morning, in fact, and I'll keep you guys updated on that. But in the meantime, please subscribe to our new YouTube channel, at Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube. And then ultimately, if you are a podcast listener, thank you. You're maybe the biggest part of our entire audience. Please hit subscribe or follow on iTunes if you haven't already, because that makes sure every time we do a new episode, it's there in your feed every single time. And then you can also, maybe if you wouldn't mind, leave us a 5-star review if you love us, of course. And thank you to all of you that have done that. We appreciate all of those as well. We appreciate our friends over at Beam as well. You know, I've talked about Beam's Dream Powder before on the show, and I just never had gotten a chance before to try it. I had a chance to try it a couple of weeks ago, and dude, man, I slept great. Tried it a couple more times. Slept great. So I can personally vouch for this stuff. It really works. And I know what you're thinking. Do I really want to drink a bunch of hot cocoa right before bed? All those carbs, all that sugar? Well, you don't have to worry about that with Beam. It's carbless. It's relatively low in sugar. All right. Doesn't mean it's tasteless, by the way. It tastes absolutely great. I'm doing the chocolate peanut butter flavor. That's the one that I'm doing right now, because you know me. I like chocolate and peanut butter. To me is, you can fry it, you can boil it, you can broil it. All right. It's a way of life. It's not just a delicacy. All right. It's designed to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, wake up feeling amazing with a science-backed, healthy nighttime blend with ingredients shown to improve sleep like reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, and more. All right. And yes, melatonin as well. All right. Beam has already improved over 17.5 million nights of sleep. Why don't you see if it can do the same thing for you? I use it myself here a few times in the last couple of weeks. Love the results. And Beam is giving the Ultimate Patriot discount right now of 40% off if you try their best-selling Dream Powder. They got lots of other flavors, although I would highly recommend the chocolate peanut butter. You get up to 40% off for a limited time at shopbeam.com/Steve. Again, use the code Steve at checkout. Shop Beam, like beam in your eye, BEAM as in Mary. Shopbeam.com/Steve. Shopbeam.com/Steve. Use the code Steve for 40% off. Get a good night's sleep and support an American company and investing in getting your best sleep tonight. Shopbeam.com/Steve. Use the code Steve for the big discount. All right, we ready to roll out some Feedback Friday?
Let's have it.
You bet.
All right, let's do this one. Let's start with this one from Eric Baker, who's got some quick takes on several different fronts. He says the Democratic Party has always been and will always be the party of indentured servants and slaves. Elites get to own everything. Experts are basically screenwriters who create whatever science or news narrative is needed to promote their crap ideas. Bureaucrats are the enforcers who punish anyone who doesn't fall in line. Todd, what do you think?
Yeah, and especially the part, I mean, do some serious thinking about how much Hollywood has played a role in brainwashing the
conditioning
masses,
yes,
by movies that produced that were popular, seemingly benign, or even like Once More Into the Breach. That was inspiring, but how they softened us up ultimately at the end of the day.
That reminds me, let me go pull this up because Daniel DM'd me this. Let me make sure I have the number exactly right. Here we go. Latest YouGov poll. Now, here's the thing you need to remember about YouGov polls. YouGov polls are only online. All right. And so it's not as youth biased as it was like 10 years ago, as more and more people generationally are more accustomed to reacting to things online. But it is still a poll that as a scheme, because it's online polling only, tends to be biased more towards a younger sample. Okay.
But can you vote more than once?
No, it's still scientifically done.
Okay.
But it's conducted solely online.
Got it.
Okay, that's YouGov's kind of scheme. All right. Support for homosexuals marrying in America. It's down to 52% overall. Only 52%. We're barely over the Mendoza line right now with everything that's gone on. And remember, let's connect a couple dots from just last hour to what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Remember what I said to Steve Friend that bothered me the most about whatever that amateur hour Pam Bondi tried doing a week ago Friday. And it really bothered me that you're taking some of the influencers that have been among the most, and we did a whole overtime about this, by the way. I did an overtime, and you guys chimed in too. Last Friday, we did not do our normal best and worst of the week. So if you, and you know, every now and then a team needs to have a team meeting, right? You know, and you need to get some things said privately amongst the team that needs to be said that are not necessarily for public consumption and, you know, for the ether. Not everybody needs to hear that stuff, so you can be a little bit more blunt and honest with one another, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we had one of those in our overtime. You know, we kept it behind the paywall rather than out in the ether where everybody could tune in, because we kind of figure if you're subscribing to Blaze TV, you know, then you have an extra layer of commitment, you know, and like we like to say, what's typically said in the overtime stays in the overtime, okay? So some of what I said to Steve Friend about what happened last Friday is what I said in the overtime. I said a lot more than that, but that's some of what I said. So you kind of get a gist. And if you missed that overtime, you're not yet a subscriber, I think you should go back and listen to it at blazetv.com/Deace. But one of the things that really bothered me is, yes, I mean, ultimately, and her name, Rhea is her name, right, I believe? The libs of TikTok.
Shea Raycheck.
Shea, thank you. Shea, not Rhea, Shea. Thank you, Aaron. And so ultimately, just like, you know, hey, your daughter's a high-level athlete. Ultimately, she is responsible for what she does on the field of play, right?
Yes.
As a player, right? Okay. However, the coach is doing something, right?
Yeah.
He's getting paid to do something, right? And what he's getting paid to do is to put her in the best possible situation to be successful out on the field, right?
Yes.
Okay. So ultimately, Shea being out there with high, you know, with high heel pumps, and, you know, waving around the, you know, a binder on camera, you know, that purports to be about women that were just literally soul tortured on Epstein Island. That's not a good look for her ultimately, right? She's the player on the field. She chose to be a part of that photo op, right? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
But she didn't put herself in that position, though, did she?
Right.
Right. And she's the player on the field, and that's her job, okay? But ultimately, a coach said, hey, that's the play we're running. That's the play you got to go out there and run, okay?
Right.
And that was and who's making that play call? Pam Bondi is. And was that a good play call?
It was not.
It was not a good play call. You know, and Shea has been a real asset. I mean, guys, just one example. I don't know that school choice happens in all these states without Libs of TikTok's account.
Oh, yeah.
Fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, she completely
totally broke the dam.
I mean, that little Jewish woman did more in 2 years to just completely decimate the teachers union industrial complex than the entire right was able to do the first 20 years I've worked in this business.
Yes.
So that's an asset, right? That's I mean, hey, if the quarterback throws the interception, that's on him. He threw the pick, right? That shows up in his stats, right? Okay. But if the coach, if you go back and you watch the film and the coach called a play, that he should have looked at that defense and said, there's no way that receiver's going to be open. This play's not going to work. So he's responsible then because he put the quarterback in the position to make that mistake, right? And Pam Bondi is the coach here. You do not take an asset like Shea Raycheck and you do not just turn her into another cavalier influencer. She's got all the influence she needs. She doesn't need to do anything. Doesn't have to look silly to build an audience. She's earned it the hard way. She's one of the first names that the left ever went after for doxing and everything else. Dude, she's literally Betsy frickin' Ross of the American modern digital right. Is that fair? You don't put her in that kind of position. And they did. That's clown show. You don't take your best players and put them in and go tell them to run plays that just had never had a chance of working. Don't do that. And what bothers me about this is when we have moments when we can take advantage of these things. And you look at the support here for same-sex marriage dropping to 52%. That's all in reaction to things like Libs of TikTok unveiled. There's this the spillover. You know, they were looking for spillover potential in the Wuhan lab. Well, here is some real spillover potential. What Shea Raycheck and a couple of others did to expose what was going on in the schools is the biggest. It certainly ain't a bunch of righteous preaching in our pulpits. Can I get a witness on that?
It is not.
I mean, when's the last time you walked in an American pulpit? And guys, we need to get hardcore here about redefining the definition of marriage as the building block of human society. When was the last time you walked in an American church and heard that? Okay. Now, I'll get 50 emails from people who told me they heard one from their pastor last week. But that, again, that's in this audience. Outside of this audience, everybody else that goes to church, how many times they hear in that message? Not much. So they pretty much got more exposed to the evils of this worldview from Shea Rashik than they did from their own pulpit the last few years.
Yes,
Can I get a witness on that?
Sure.
So this stat is the spillover potential of what she did. Because people just started connecting the dots. You've heard me say before, all people are sinful, but they're not all stupid. They started connecting the dots. Well, where'd this stuff come from? Why are we teaching this to our kids? Where did it originate? What was the inflection point that let this camel's nose under the tent? Bingo. This is why they hated all the slippery slope arguments we were making in opposition to this a decade ago, because we were going to be right about them all, and we are. And this is an example of that. I mean, that dropping to 52%, and it's been solely because the narrative has shifted. They've exhausted their narrative. We've seen it all. Every new show, every new movie, the only smart, well-adjusted person's the homosexual. That worked for about 5, 6, 7, 8 years, right? And then it became a trope. And then along comes libs of TikTok and Shea Rashik and a few other people that are like, let me show you guys the Paul Harvey other side of the story here. So yeah, who controls the narrative matters a ton. Number 2. Aaron, this one's for you. Eric writes, Islam and progressivism are two sides of the same coin. Muslims believe in a false prophet and look at non-believers as unworthy of sharing this planet with. Progressives believe they are prophets and look at non-believers as unworthy of sharing the planet with.
Yeah. Yep. They're both religions of dominion. That's the biggest thing that's in common.
Yep.
They're both religions of enslavement. They're both religions of conquest. They really are. And, one religion, they'll do conquest by swords, by blowing things up. And then the other one is just a conquest of institutions, a conquest of culture. It's seizing the means of cultural production. So, yeah, they're religions of dominion. And going back to the first one, how Democrats are still the party of really slavery and what I don't know,
indentured
servitude. Yeah, they do this in one of two ways. This is how they do conquest. They do work for no pay or pay with no work. That's basically how they achieve that. It's a funny quip, but basically work with no pay. That would be chattel labor coming in from the hinterlands of all points of the earth via open borders. And pay with no work is the welfare state. That's how they enslave people.
All right, I'm going to take number 3 from Eric here. During campaigns, Democrats are actually pretty honest when they tell us what they want to do, but they lie about why they want to do it. Exactly right. Most Republicans are actually just Democrats that are lying about what they want to do. This is exactly correct. Let me give you an example, Obamacare. Obama ran openly on Obamacare, did he not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Got elected on it, in fact. Okay. Ran openly on it from the very beginning. But what he didn't tell you is why he really wanted to do it. He told us it was because there are too many, what was the number at the time? 20 million or something like that. 12 million, 16 million, something between 12 and 20 million people in America without health insurance, right? And so we had to have Obamacare. So here's the thing. He didn't have to do it that way. And I actually said this at the time. People just weren't listening. If the issue really is that there's too many uninsured people, then just triple the spending money in Medicaid. Just expand Medicaid then. No one in my lifetime's ever lost an election for spending too much money. Never happened. Not once in my lifetime has someone lost an election because they spent too much money. Never happened once. Maybe it happened in somebody else's lifetime. Hasn't happened in mine. People lose elections because of how they spent that money and what the money they spent did. The reason why there was a Tea Party movement and Obamacare destroyed the Democratic Party nationwide in 2 midterm elections is because it took people's doctor away. Remember, that was the PolitiFact lie of the year. It took people's doctor away, and it made your health care worse. Men are now paying for pap smears with community ratings, and women are paying for prostate exams and everything. You're paying for abortions and everything else. It's not that it spent too much money. It's what the coverage was and wasn't. That was the issue. It disrupted people's personal health care. If Obama would have just said, "Hey, I'm calling up the Federal Reserve over there. Hey, we're going to need a blue light special. Need to go ahead and take those copy machines. We're just printing off that paper and just run it at 3 times speed. All right, and pump all that money into Medicaid. Guys, I'm just telling you right now, you won't want to hear this, but it's true. And that's my job. I'm your dad. not your mom. My job's to tell you what's true, not what's going to make you happy and uplifted and hope-filled, all right? I promise you, there's never a Tea Party movement if Obama does that. There's some kind of resistance, but they don't wipe out the Democratic Party in 2 midterm elections. The energy's not there. You never lose an election for spending too much money. That shouldn't be the case, but it is.
Yeah, you're talking the presidency that just came before Obama is responsible for Medicare Part D, after all.
Correct.
To make your point.
George W. Bush, correct. So then why didn't they do that, Steve? If it was just that simple, Steve, why didn't they do that? Because if they would have just done that, it wouldn't have given them the power and control over the system that they wanted. And that's why, and this goes back to your buddy Rick Santorum, and I've quoted him many times over the years, one of the best observations I've heard in my entire career is when he said, even if the Democrats knew they were going to lose 1,000 elections over Obamacare before they did it, they would have still done it anyway. And he was right. Because it reset the system. It gave them the power and the control over your personal health care that they wanted.
It made transgenderism possible.
Correct.
To the extent that it was weaponized.
Listen,
like
guys,
that.
right now, let's say you're in a situation, you're an older woman, and your breasts are not as full as they were before you had kids and got old, okay? And now they're heavy, and you've got neck issues, back issues, and you want to go get a breast reduction, right? Your insurance going to cover that?
No.
Hell no. Let's say you're a dude with an Adam's apple, all right? And you bench press 225. Okay, and you can grow a beard better than me because I can't grow one at all. And you decide you want to have breast addition done.
You can get incarcerated for murder and make that request.
Will your insurance company cover that?
Yes.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, we were
will.
just talking about this last week. Young women struggling with fertility. Sometimes you need to have hormone replacement, sometimes hormone supplements if you're low on estrogen, progesterone, things like that. But estrogen, I think, is the main one that we're talking about here. Insurance doesn't cover that for that purposes. No. And sometimes if you go to your compounder, you can't even find it. Why? Because our insurance companies are paying for it for dudes who feel pretty. That's just bass backward.
Correct. So they could have just tripled the amount of money that was already in a Medicaid and established entitlement and told people if you don't have insurance, you have an entitlement now through Medicaid until you can afford your own. And Mitch McConnell maybe is never Senate Majority Leader in that era if that happens. John Boehner's maybe never Speaker of the House if that happens. 1,000 Democrats absolutely don't lose their jobs and elections in the next 8 years if that happens. So why didn't they do that? Because it wasn't going to give them the control of the system they wanted. It's always about power and control on the left. And so that's why the juice was worth the squeeze. It was worth the electoral hit. And that, Eric, goes right to what you just said. Democrats are pretty honest about what they're going to do, not honest about why they're going to do it. That's exactly right.
This is why I was absolutely shocked that I've never seen this paradigm blown up and reversed as much as we just saw in the last couple weeks in the Iowa legislature with what they did with pulling gender identity. Mm-hmm. Because last year we went down there, we spoke, it didn't go through. And I mean, I was a little pissed. I was like, are you wasting my time? Just don't even waste my time. You're not here. They actually learned the lesson you're talking about, though, Steve. They said, you know what? We didn't go far enough. Just changing the definition of the terms amongst the people is immoral, and the legal apparatus is as broken as it isn't going to do it, because we still have the fundamental battle where the transgenders are still have that fundamental claim.
Yeah, you got a fundamental claim in the Civil Rights Code. Yep.
You've got to take that out.
You have to rip it out root and branch.
Did.
Yep.
This is a model, not just on transgenderism, everything else going forward. Thank God it's not just power, it's moral power in our case. But it takes absolutely what you just said, Steve, and finally went to war with it.
Final one here from Eric. Most Americans think Doge is taking an axe to waste, fraud, and abuse, and are pretty happy about it. In reality, Doge is at best a scalpel cutting waste. We're literally watching in real time as the Republican-controlled Congress is trying to replace any reduction in waste, fraud, and abuse with more waste, fraud, and abuse, with increases in spending and deficits coming to the federal budget. The federal budget is the grift, funds the grift, and enforces the grift. I just don't think enough citizens understand that behind our failed searches, the federal budget is our number one enemy. I slightly disagree with this. The federal budget is the manifestation of the people. The people are the problem. Okay? Like, I've got emails, they're cutting the VA. A week ago, probably people that were emailing me complaining about cutting the VA loved when they were cutting USAID. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Everybody loves it until it's their pet project, their cause. That's just the reality of it. And of course, you think your cause and project is noble. Everybody does. And worthy. Everybody does. On the surface, veterans, the VA looks like something we shouldn't cut. Not like they've been doing an exemplary job, right? On the other hand, if they're not doing an exemplary job, why don't we just get rid of the jobs of the people that aren't doing exemplary? You see what I'm saying? Okay. But that's my point. Treason never prospers. What's the reason? Because whenever treason prospers, none will dare call it treason. We all now have, every one of us has a suckling spot on the teat. Every one of us does. That's the beauty of the welfare state. None will dare call it treason. Doge is not cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. Doge is exposing corruption. So, Eric, I think your first three were a grand slam. This one, I think, is kind of a solid base hit up the middle. Got to see the broader picture here. Doge is not about waste, fraud, and abuse. They might be saying that's what it is, but notice what they're going after is corruption. Obvious corruption. Because if you brand it as corruption, people will let you cut that, right? If it's about government spending and programs and things that help people and entitlements, they won't let you cut that. What did I just say a minute ago? Who's lost an election in the last 50 years of my life for spending too little money?
Right.
Anybody? Nobody that I know. RRD. I don't know anybody that's lost an election in Washington for spending too much money in my lifetime. I'm 51 years old. So what Doge is really trying to do is isolate obvious points of corruption. Or fraud, if you prefer, in order to rebrand these things as cuttable in the minds of the people. To detach the emotional connection and manipulation that comes from all the varied interests who squeal every time you try to cut them off the gravy train. Corruption people will go after. Profligate spending, they won't. It has to be deemed and demonstrated to be corrupt.
Yeah, we talk a lot about psyops and usually the evil kinds, but what you just
we're doing a psyop of our own.
We're doing a psyop, and
yes,
it's necessary because
that's a great point.
Look at what the Department of Education and Public Education. Look what it's done to your kids on multiple levels.
And yet, how many people will still say, I know the schools are indoctrinated, but my school district is great. I know congressmen are corrupt, but mine is great. That's why 94% of them win every incumbent wins every election. Yeah. Yep. Mike writes, I appreciate the analogy this week that we need to be debating the consensus after World War I instead of World War II and how that applies to Ukraine and what's going on with Russia. I am wondering, however, with all the evil pervading throughout Europe, is there a scenario that a war there would be our fight? Please don't read this as snotty. Mike, it's not a snotty question at all. It's a great question, Mike. It's a very insightful one. And it's one that I am wrestling with. In fact, let's not even talk about Europe for a second. The people governing California, Oregon, Illinois, Massachusetts, we talked about that just last hour from Aaron's montage, the mayor of Boston, right? What would be the war? Before I even talk about Germany and the UK, who are, their panties wad up over being told to stop acting like Putin, okay, with free speech. What war within our own country could present itself? What external enemy could present itself that I would think I need to fight alongside the mayor of Boston? That Aaron, you just highlighted last hour. What would that threat be? I don't know what it would be. I mean, when I look at the nations that would dare even attempt to step upon our soil, the mayor of Boston's worldview is way more closely aligned with their worldview than mine is with hers. I mean, how do I know she's not like the people and the visitors when we were growing up that welcomed him in? You know what I'm saying? I don't know. Mike, your question is so good about Europe. I don't even know how I'd applied it here domestically. I don't know. I have no idea. The government of California sending out yesterday notices in the mail, or earlier this week, notices in the mail on how not to be transphobic in the workplace. What external threat would arrive on California soil that I would think that is a worthy cause for my granddaughter Autumn to grow up without a dad because he's enlisted and he needs to go fight in that cause? What would it be? And I got to tell you guys, I have no idea what it would be. Do you have any ideas what it would be? I don't know. I'm not being facetious. I don't have an answer to this question. I don't know what I have in common.
Aside from pumpkin spice being depleted, something like that.
As much as I love pumpkin spice, I don't think people need to die for that. Well, let me rephrase that. Whoever is responsible for the depletion of the pumpkin spice should die for that, yes. But as a cause, a third party doesn't have to die for that. Just want to clarify.
So just as a thought experiment, so back to the Ukraine question. We're supposed to be doing this minerals deal, correct? Yes. Those minerals are in the western regions, as I understand, of Ukraine, which has been fought over. That's what Russia ostensibly wants. Is there a scenario where our leaders recognize that, hey, this tiny little region is so rich in minerals, rare earth minerals, that if Russia takes this over, they, together with China, will have such hegemony over these resources amongst all the nations that we can never break that, and we will be completely at their beck and call? Would that be worth it? Then it's debatable, at least. Have we gotten anywhere close to that level of articulation about the why behind this conflict? Anywhere close to that?
Mm-hmm.
No. And I'm not even sure if that's even... I'm stretching here to make an example. I'm not even sure if that's even close to a reason to even consider war. But it's a good question nonetheless.
I actually think it's more likely that the scenario that is the one we should be thinking the most about is that our intervention would actually be getting in God's way. Think Book of Jeremiah. I wish that wasn't true, but there's...
Oh, you mean like invaders sent as an act of providential divine judgment.
Yeah, and they're already there.
Yeah.
And the West is learning no lessons. They're arresting Christians praying while, jihad is literally declared in their communities.
I mean, listen, if we can't applaud a 13-year-old black kid who's beaten 13 cancer surgeries before he turned 13, then someone tell me if we can't be unified on that. And the response of the leading media platform of the other side is, hope he doesn't commit suicide. Then you tell me what basic common enemy could we possibly face that would make me think, that's a shared fight right there. That's a shared sacrifice right there. We're evenly yoked on that. I honestly do not know what it is. I don't have a clue what it is. I don't know. So, Mike, it's not a bad, snotty question at all. It's a very insightful one. And before we even had that conversation about Europe, how would we even answer that question amongst ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
More in a moment.
The first trans woman to have a successful uterus transplant.
Man enough to cook my steak rare.
But I felt God's presence with me as I made the decision to end 2 pregnancies.
No regard for human life!
I look like someone who has a mental disorder.
The garbage I see floating out there is just supporters.
Well, the big thing I learned doing this book is that the deep state is packed with patriots.
The impossible has happened!
Where HIV is now, if you are undetectable, you don't necessarily, have to disclose that.
Oh my gracious, Tim! How about that?
Cannot wait. Cannot wait. It is, 10 days from today. Marxist Madness Selection Monday, the return. Aaron has the field. He will unveil it to the three of us, Todd, you, me, and our good friend and another former sportscaster turned dreaded peddler of conservative content, Jill Savage, just like me. The three of us are going to break it down live, the field, and react. maybe even give our predictions. And then we hand it over to the audience, and we play this thing called Marxist Madness out. And there's going to be some upsets.
Oh, yes, there are.
There will be some upsets for sure.
I did give Todd a very brief look at the field just because he is the editor of the show. It was more a look at who I had cut just to make sure.
Don't show him anything else.
Just to make sure. Well, I showed him who I cut.
Okay.
Just to make sure that I wasn't missing anything obvious.
Okay.
But he is the editor, so I've got to have some level. I have to have some help in this, so I enlisted Todd.
I was worried beforehand that there wouldn't be a lot of potential for upsets. There's a lot to. I know it's a crazy world, but it's a lot of work for Aaron to do. There was like the cutting room floor, unlike with the actual basketball tournament where. Boy, let's take something perfect and add 4 more teams and let's do it again. No, stop it. You're stupid. Here, Aaron just kept reading after 64. He doubled up. He said, and it's just as crazy. Never stopped.
Can't wait. Monday, 1:00 Eastern, March 17th, St. Paddy's Day. The real field of madness gets unveiled.
The road to the Fatal 4 begins
Indeed.
on March 17th.
That's great. I love that, Aaron. Well played. I like that.
That's what it's called. That's
perfect.
The final 4. It's the Fatal 4. The last 4 contestants. It's the Fatal 4. We've got the Revolution Begins. That's the first round. Can I say this? Revolution Begins. The Soviet 16, the Elitist 8, and the Fatal 4.
Yes. That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. Although it could also be the Final 4 in its most, specific context. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. All right. This part of the show brought to you by our friends over at Jace Medical. First of all, they want to applaud all the first responders out there, but they also want to remind you that, hey, in an emergency, sometimes you've got to be your own first responder. And one of the keys tools in that toolkit you need is the Jace case, a backup of some of the most important antibiotics ever discovered by human beings, who you never know might be the next award-winning medications on the chopping block of being discredited and deconstructed right when we need them the most. And now you can, though, also expand your Jace case, not just from those great antibiotics like amoxicillin, doxycycline, and more, but now they've got a wide menu of medications that you can get backups of, specific things from EpiPen to the aforementioned or referred to ivermectin and more. You can go to jace.com, J-A-S-E, get your personalized emergency kit right now and get a discount on your order at jace.com. Get a discount on your order. You can also enter their free giveaway for a Jace case while you're there as well at jace.com. Enter the free giveaway and then get your Jace case with a discount with the promo code DACE at checkout. J-A-S-E, jace.com is where you want to go. You can enter the giveaway for a free Jace case there. Order yours as well with a discount. The promo code there is DACE for the discount on your order. All right, let's get back to some Feedback Friday, shall we?
Go.
Jason wants to know, now that the results of this election are in, is your conviction that the 2020 election was stolen stronger or weaker than the past? It's the exact same.
Yeah.
Nothing. I have no idea how this election result did anything to disprove what happened in 2020 whatsoever. I have no idea how someone could come to that conclusion. I really don't. I can understand why someone does not think the election is stolen in 2020, although I think the evidence for that is pretty flimsy. But I can understand why someone does not think the election was stolen in 2020. What I have no idea is how someone thinks that it was, but then based on the results of 24, they no longer do. I have no idea how. If anything, the fact that we had tighter controls on mail-in balloting compared to just the wide-open ballot harvesting that happened all over the country, and we got a completely different result in 24 with the same candidates than we got in 20. If anything, I think that would even anecdotally bolster the case that 2020 was stolen myself, but what do I know?
Also, to your point, Doge ultimately being about corruption, that's not fundamentally about elections right now, but that level of corruption, it's everywhere, but you don't think it's in the elections?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Let's go here. Vicky Torres says, I wish someone would suggest to Trump, rather than continuing to fund Planned Parenthood, perhaps give those dollars to people who would love to become parents and aid them in the adoption process. It's incredibly expensive. I never had children. The whole process to adopt was what was all we could do. How I would have loved to have taken an unwanted baby as my own. We just could not afford it. And so the final argument people for abortion use to bash people who are against it is we don't step up more with adoption. Well, first of all, we're like the only people stepping up and doing adoption. But that doesn't get to your overall lament, which is completely valid. The process is just way too expensive. You're correct about that. It's ridiculous that it's a lot cheaper to kill your kid than it is to adopt a kid. Wicked and debauched, in fact. So I don't have an argument with what Vicky said at all. Do you?
No.
I don't either. Chris and Stephanie Walsworth say our church had to mute our YouTube live stream during our congressional prayer in our Sunday service due to a soft strike when we prayed in a precatory prayer against the LGBTQ agenda, and they warned us it violated community standards.
Well, it's a good prayer.
Good prayer.
Yeah. Nice
First of
job.
all, props to your church that you didn't amend the prayer at all.
Yeah.
You wanted to mute it to avoid the strike. I don't have a problem with that. Okay. But I love the fact that you did not edit the word of God in order to appeal to YouTube. So I'm going to warn you, though, I have some experience as to what happens to you when you consistently do that. Okay. And it's called me having the lowest video play numbers of any show of any magnitude on the American right in the United States. That's what happens to you. Where do I want to go next here? You know what? Let's answer this one. Except I accidentally deleted the person who sent it. So I'm an idiot. Where are they? Brian Short. Okay, Brian, I got you. Brian says, as you know, President Trump created the White House Faith Office and appointed Paula White to the leadership position of the office. Clearly, there are significant concerns around the appointment of someone with her background and credentials that could lead to a heretical influence in the White House in a non-biblical world. As hopeful as we may have been for a better America under the Trump-Vance ticket, I believe this is indicative of Trump's worldview and a lack of discernment through the power of faith in our triune God. I wanted to get your thoughts about this appointment and where you believe this takes our country in light of the forces of evil at work in our world and in our country. Do you believe or know if Franklin Graham or other leaders of faith are trying to speak truth into President Trump and Vice President Vance from the perspective of this appointment? Well, number one, I would not apply J.D. Vance to this whatsoever. J.D. Vance became a Christian literally a year or two ago. He's also a Catholic. He probably, whenever these internecine fights on the evangelical side come up, Todd, your typical response is what?
I'm Catholic.
Yeah, I guarantee you that Vance knows, maybe he's heard the term word of faith and can define it, but I just not in the weeds of this. So I would completely divorce him. It's not the vice president's office of faith. It's the presidential one. So I'd divorce him from this. In terms of Trump, well, first of all, we need to do this, and we haven't done this in a while. What is the issue with Paula White? She teaches a heresy called the prosperity gospel, number one. She does not teach the actual gospel and never has. What's the actual gospel? Sin, repentance, redemption. She doesn't teach that. She's been married multiple times. That's an autumn. Before we even get to should a woman bear the title of pastor, which I believe they should not, because the Bible is very clear on this. But before we even get to that, she would be disqualified by any moral standard anyway, because she's been married and divorced on multiple occasions. And it's not because she's routinely widowed. She's had all kinds of financial allegations against her, churches that have gone up and bellied up and everything else. I mean, it's a trail of tears, folks. Trail of tears. So, yes, she is a problematic figure for sure. She's also, I can't ask. I think you asked a very key point there, Brian, which is why I liked your approach to this. You asked, what about people like Franklin Graham? Have they gone to him and said, hey, do you know who you're surrounded? I will guarantee you they haven't. I'd put real money on it. Maybe all of my wages last year that's never happened once. And that's the real problem. The real problem, one of the great kings of Israel, maybe Israel's last great king in the Old Testament, was a king named Josiah. And Josiah was maybe the last great king Israel had, because there were other kings that would, after a period of idolatry, restore worship in the one true God of the Bible. But it was very rare that those kings would actually get rid of all the worship of all the other idols, particularly in what were known at the time, in Bible times, as high places. Now, what were these high places? These were places, these are forerunners to what became known later in pagan mythologies as maypoles. These were the forerunner to this. Every pagan religion in the history of the world has had the exact same MO because they're from the same source, the devil. There's always a male lord and there's always a female consort that determines fertility of both human relationships and the land. And therefore, in order to gain her favor, sexual lasciviousness must be promoted. That happened. That dynamic. Okay, Anubis and Ishtar. We can do this with every single one. Aphrodite and Zeus, Venus and Saturn and Jupiter. This exists in every pagan system. Every single one. This dynamic exists. Because they come from the same source. Just like morality in every religious system is pretty much the same, and C.S. Lewis once observed that's evidence we're from the same creator. The idea that every pagan occult religion has largely the same schema, but the names are different, is indicative that they all come from the same deceptive deceiver source. And the one that was the most prominent in ancient Israel was the worship of a demon named Baal. B-A-A-L, which means Lord. And again, Baal also had a female consort. Her name was Asherah. And what would happen is, in order to appease Asherah, so that you would have fertility both of the land and your womb, they would erect poles in the high places, forerunners to what were known as maypoles in Western pagan tradition. And it was there that what was called temple prostitution took place. That literally just meant you had sex with members of the temple in order to appease the female demonic small g goddess. And when they got really debauched, they'd have the male prostitutes then too. So there were other kings of Israel that would restore the temple of God and the worship of God and the practice of the law and the Passover and the festivals, but it was rare that they would go to the high places and tear it down. Josiah is the last king of Israel, I believe, who did that. Now, did Josiah just get up one day and say, boy, this is pretty wicked what's happening in my country. I'm just going to go to the high place? And no, that's not what happened. What happened is a priest came to him. A priest by the name of Hilkiah, in the family line of Jeremiah, comes to Josiah and says, hey, man, I was cleaning out the temple the other day and I found this scroll. You might want to read this, cat, because we're in trouble. It's the law. It's the Bible. Josiah reads this and recognizes, you're right. And he goes to the nth degree. He goes full Todd Erzin. Even goes to the high places and tears them all down. You may be shocked to hear this in 21st century America, but the ancient Jewish people loved their sexual lasciviousness. That's why that was often left alone while the rest of the pagan relics were taken down. Because that was their fourth rail politically. Don't touch that. Well, Josiah did. Tore it all down. Burnt it all. Executed every member of the pagan cult. And burnt it to ash. He's maybe the last great king of Israel. Trump is not going to instinctively realize he can get an upgrade over Paula White. Just like Josiah didn't instinctively know it either. The priest had to go to him. David was not going to instinctively repent of his sin to Bathsheba. The prophet Nathan had to go to him and say, thou art the man. This is the role of the church. And this is the thing. We can't make the opposite mistake. We cannot go from, we're going to abrogate our moral authority in the culture so that a political party takes our place, to we're now going to be mascots of a political party. That's the same lie. We'll end up in the same ditch. Just driving from one direction or different from the other, we end up in the same ditch. We can't. That's abrogating your moral authority in the other direction.
That's happening as you speak, Steve, in Washington, D.C., at an anti-Trump, pro-science rally. What, you're just articulating the other side of the ditch?
Mm-hmm.
Here's Francis Collins, as you were speaking.
Noble dream. Have you got that? So it's just all the good people.
That's another example of abrogating your witness.
Yes.
Elevating guys like that. That's what the church has done. That's what the church did during COVID.
The church should be joining Trump in this moral fight. But you also, while joining him, you don't abandon your prophetic responsibility at the exact same time. He's not Lord, he's president. So while he is while he's King Josiahing right now, we should be helping him in that fight. That's our fight ultimately. But when he makes mistakes, there needs to be people that go to him and say, "Hey, thou art the man." That's what's lacking. That's what's lacking. Great question, Brian. Thank you for the note. Good place to end it for the week. Everybody enjoy your weekends, and hopefully you get great weather this time of year. Romans 8:28.